Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online. News that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Thank you for joining us on this special edition of Newsmakers. I'm Fred Martino. We're partnering with the NAACP of Doña Ana County to focus on civil rights issues. Today we continue our discussion of police oversight and reform. Last week we talked with Las Cruces Police Chief Miguel Dominguez. Today we welcome Las Cruces Mayor Ken Miyagishima and City Councilor Johana Bencomo. My co-host, as usual, is NAACP President Dr. Bobbie Green. Welcome to all of you. And Bobbie, I know you have the first question.
Thank you again, Fred, and a special thanks, as always, to KRWG for the partnership. And I want to extend a special thank you to our mayor. I know you have many things to do, Mayor Miyagishima, and so we are very grateful that you have been a longtime supporter of the NAACP and that you are willing to take time out of your schedule even today. Councilwoman Bencomo, thank you. What an honor. We have watched you from a distance and we expect great things from you. And so I'm very grateful for your time as well. My first question, it's going to be ladies first. So I'm going to start with Councilor Bencomo. Recently, I attended a working session with the City Council. I believe you were there, the mayor was there, a lot of city leaders and people from the community were there. And the working session was on police reform and 8 Can't Wait. The 8 Can't Wait initiative, which calls for a ban on chokeholds and strangleholds, which is important given the circumstances of the Valenzuela case last year. It requires de-escalation, requires warning before shooting. It requires exhaust all alternatives before shooting, a duty to intervene, ban shooting at moving vehicles, require the use of force continuum, and require comprehensive reporting. Councilwoman Bencomo, in your opinion, where do you think the Las Cruces Police Department is with regard to 8 Can't Wait?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say thank you to both you, Dr. Green, the NAACP, and of course, Fred and my friends at KRWG for having us and for hosting this conversation, and for the mayor joining me on this panel. You know, Dr. Green, I've looked a lot into the 8 Can't Wait policy recommendations, and I had even brought some concerns to that work session that you're talking about because prominent organizations working around policing and police reform have spoken out against some of these reforms because often they, like the Movement for Black Lives, who have come up with pretty significant policy recommendations federally and at the statewide level. And often the criticism of these 8 Can't Wait policies is that they are already often implemented in police departments. I mean, police departments like Chicago, New York, LA, and even Las Cruces have already implemented some of these things, yet we continue to see misconduct. We continue to see some of these policies and procedures not being taken seriously, perhaps. And honestly, at the end of the day, I think that Las Cruces is meeting a lot of these. However, I think what ends up happening is that these types of reforms don't allow us for a much deeper and more important conversation that we need to have around policing and how we can just better understand the inherent problems with the way we currently do policing, and then figure out how to come up with solutions that actually feel good and meaningful to our community.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I know that you've been working diligently to try to get these initiatives out there. You're the spearhead behind this, is from my understanding. So where do you think Las Cruces Police Department is with regard to 8 Can't Wait?
Well, thank you, Dr. Green and Fred and Councilor. for having this conversation. It's a very important conversation. I will tell you that for the most part of the 8 items, the Las Cruces Police Department probably has 7 of them. Though I'm going to highlight the one that we actually used to do, number 7, require the use of force continuum. We changed that in 2008, and let me explain why. So when you look at the use of force continuum, it's really more of if a person does one thing, the police officer can do another. So like, for example, if someone was to have a knife or a bat at a police officer, the continuum says they can use deadly force. And so we used to actually, now by having the current system, the Las Cruces Police Department is now looking to investigate using a lot of rubber bullets, rifles of that means, instead of just using deadly force against deadly force. And that's one of the things that we actually had a lot more lawsuits when we had the use of force continuum than what we do now. I know it looks like we may have, but for the most part, if you were to go back and look at the city of Las Cruces track history before we changed, you'll find why we moved in that direction. So that's kind of where we're at on that.
Okay, moving along, litigation, of course, as a result of police misconduct is an expense which trickles down to taxpayers, even if that simply is referring to increased costs of insurance. The city of Las Cruces agreed to pay $6.5 million to the family of Antonio Valenzuela, who died during a traffic stop. What do you think that Las Cruces should do to protect taxpayers and reduce claims of police misconduct? And Mayor, I'll start with you on this one.
Sure. Well, nobody, including the police department, likes to have a bad cop. If they do, they want to get rid of them, because not only does that hurt the department, but the profession and the city and the state as a whole, and the nation, really. One of the things that the city does is we set aside a certain amount of money every year because we're self-insured. And so I can tell you right now, we have never had to raise taxes to cover any type of claim. Las Cruces Police Department is accredited, so in order to meet that, they have to hit certain specifications to keep that accreditation. I will tell you though, and I don't know if we're going to get into this, but House Bill 4 is going to maybe raise taxes if this is passed. This has now doubled the tort limit that was what's currently $1.05 million. It's gone to $2 million now. And so that, I can tell you, if your listeners can contact the governor's office to veto that, that could very well cause us to increase taxes.
Johana, your thoughts on this, what Las Cruces can do to protect taxpayers and also reduce the claims of police misconduct?
Thank you, Fred, for the question. I mean, we protect taxpayers by protecting our residents from bad police behavior, right? We have to have strong policies and procedures in place. We have to have accountability measures in place, and then follow through with them. They're not just policies that can be pretty on paper, but they're meant to be followed meticulously. And I know that that's a high standard, but for an institution that has so much power, that has to be the standard. And so, I think we also have to lay out a set of consequences for those who do not follow these policies and procedures. And just like there are consequences for elected officials who engage in unethical behavior, there should be for public servants, particularly those who are engaged in public safety, in like police departments. When police departments have greater trust, there will be less people who want to sue the police department. I think I disagree with Mr. Mayor on House Bill 4 on the Civil Rights Act. I think that's actually opening up the ability for people to have a broader set of rights. And if we have serious accountability measures and consequences set in place, a lot less people are going to want to engage in bad behavior, and a lot less people are going. And suing should be the last of our problems, frankly. What should be our main priority is ensuring people's health, ensuring people's livelihood. A traffic stop should not end in a fatal situation, and so that should be our main priority as we address the issues you've raised in this question.
Okay, and for folks who missed our show last week, we should note that a requirement in New Mexico is to use police body cameras. The city of Las Cruces was doing that before the state required it, and last week in our show it was noted that any interaction with the public is recorded, and that's kept for a minimum of 90 days. So there is a chance for, in the city of Las Cruces, for a real proactive approach by routinely reviewing that kind of video. Now, I'm not sure if that is occurring. I don't know, Mayor and Johana, I don't know if you're aware if there's a routine of randomly looking at that video, or if it's only done if there's a complaint made. But this is something that folks should be aware of, that there is a chance in Las Cruces to be proactive. Before we move on to the next question, I'm not sure, do either one of you know if that's being done, the routine review of the video?
Fred, I believe that within the department there's internal affairs, and I believe just as a common practice, they'll probably look through it. I mean, they won't be looking for anything in particular, but something that stands out, I believe that they do review those.
Okay, well, we'll have to follow up on that. Bobbie, I know you have another question that relates to this, this question of trust that Johana brought up.
Yes, I do. Thank you. And Councilwoman, I appreciate your candor. So let me ask you this question. How can the city of Las Cruces bounce back from inherent police mistrust that led to protests, even in the city of Las Cruces, in streets all over the country, after numerous killings of unarmed people of color by the police nationwide, including here in Las Cruces with the Antonio Valenzuela case? How can we bounce back from the inherent mistrust?
Thank you, Dr. Green. I am very clear that public acknowledgments of wrongdoing, public recognition of pain that has been caused, make a huge impact on communities. When public officials, when leaders say this was wrong and we should change it, I think it's such an important step. But of course, that's not it, right? I think we have to stop being so defensive when it comes to some of these conversations and show up ready to have a policy discussion that is really committed to change. But honestly, Dr. Green, I think on a much larger scale and maybe on a longer term plan, we have to be committed to working to meet people's needs, meet people where they are in our communities. I think when people are suffering less from poverty, when people are suffering less from addiction, mental health issues, when people are suffering less from homelessness and insecurity, they are much less likely to end up in distress in a situation where they have to engage with police officers. And honestly, that's one of the other bigger things that we have to do is we have given police officers such a huge, broad scope of work. And we've said, here, you are the front line of dealing with all of our societal and community challenges. And I don't think that's right? We have to allocate resources differently so that we are engaging much better in mental health situations, when dealing with people with addiction and homelessness. That shouldn't just be the role of the police department. We have to invest our resources much differently. And honestly, I think we're making huge strides in that. I'm excited to be working with Mayor Pro Tem Gandara very closely to really push the city to have a crisis mobile unit, an idea that is not new. It is something that's been tested and proved, right? Sending in social workers, people trained in crisis de-escalation into those situations so that people don't end up in a situation where they have to encounter the police. So I think we have a lot of work to do in Las Cruces, but certainly work that I think is definitely moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask you the same question. I saw a video just yesterday on the news where a young man was tackled by the police and he ended up dead for jaywalking. And so, I mean, because of videos, we've seen a lot of things that we wouldn't normally know. How can we in the city of Las Cruces bounce back from the inherent police mistrust that has led to protests all over the country, including here in our city?
Sure. Well, thank you, Dr. Green. So first off, all lives are precious, right? And if I can have you clarify, the video you saw was not in the city of Las Cruces. You're talking elsewhere?
I'm talking about San Clemente, California.
Okay, good, because
no,
it was
here. No.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I wanted the audience to know that.
Yes, thank you for that.
You know, one of the things that Councilor Bencomo and I are given the opportunity is to basically help, to formulate policy for the city of Las Cruces. You know, we have one employee that's a city manager, and he oversees all 1,600 employees, including the chief of police, as well as all the rank and file. So what I'm trying to get at is, and I know I had a chance to send you a copy, Fred and the counselor, a diagram. Oftentimes we hear that New Mexico is the #1 state for police killings. And unfortunately, that's true. Like I said, all lives are precious, and we don't like to lose anyone, whether of color or not. And so, but I also sent you a list of, unfortunately, our neighbors to the north. Albuquerque is number 11. 18.1 fatal police shootings per 100,000 residents. Dr. Green, we're 100,000. We don't have 18 killings per year. That is unacceptable. That's maybe why they have been taken over by the federal government. What I'm trying to get at is this. A lot of these areas, and there's 27 states, and New Mexico is not one of them, 27 states where, unfortunately, people of color are killed. The number of people killed exceed the total number. Did you see some of these states? That's terrible. And what I'm trying to get at is the buck stops with Councilor Bencomo and I, and that's why I'm glad to hear, you know, we are working on making sure we do everything we can to give both our men and women of the police department and the citizens everything they need so that we can live in our community as one. And it's just, I really get right down to it. It's about that and the trust. So that's really all I can tell you. We're working hard as much as we can. And, you know, I'm proud of our police department.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week on the program, the City of Las Cruces Police Chief Miguel Dominguez did not express support for one tool that's being used in certain communities to increase trust in the police, and that is a citizens review board. Mayor, I know in the past you have not supported a citizens review board either. Is that still your position?
It is, Fred. In fact, I just realized I never sent you this article from Frontline. It says, is civilian oversight the answer of distrust of police? And they talk about it. It's a PBS, which I know you're PBS. And they talk about some of the concerns that the Civilian Review Board, basically in the final analysis, all they end up doing is reviewing complaints against the police department. And so that's why, and I go back to my good friend, rest in peace, Councilor Miguel Silva. He and I had this discussion about why we should have this outside agency, in which we did hire recently. And basically what they do is they audit the outcomes of the Internal Affairs Office investigations into police misconduct and determine the accuracy and completeness of the final report. They review all formal citizen and internally initiated complaints against officers, plus police complaints, and the city's anonymous hotline. And they also are tasked with ways to have LCPD improve accountability and transparency. And so they come before City Council every 6 months, and they list out all the different items that they have found. And I think that's the way to be transparent.
And
so that's why.
And you're talking about a police auditor,
Yes.
which I know that the city just hired a new police auditor, signed a contract. I believe it was unanimous, correct?
Correct.
But you're saying that you don't think a citizens review board could complement the work of the auditor, that they could work together, both of them work on this issue?
Well, if you have this, if we're paying this organization to do this, and then you have the citizens review board that really doesn't have that power, because we can't provide that to them. And then you also have to look at the liability end of it. Now, and then, we're not really a huge city. I mean, there's a lot of people who know, it's a little bit different in a smaller town than it is, say, New York City. And you can walk New York City for days and not recognize anyone that you've ever met, at least in my opinion. Here, you can walk outside the door, spot, oh, hey, there's Johana over there. There's
I understand.
Bobbie.
Yeah, and you had expressed that in our previous program, the concern of conflict of interest due to folks knowing each other. Johana, when we talked to you about this in that previous program, you supported the idea of a citizens review board for complaints against police. That's much more limited in scope than what the auditor does if you just have a board look at complaints. Do you still feel that way?
Fred, and maybe the mayor might be surprised by this, but I've actually been doing a lot of research on some of these policy solutions, and I've began to move away from actually supporting a community oversight committee. Similar reasons as the mayor, but in addition to, I really think that often what I've seen across the country, these committee review boards have very little power. They have very little scope. They don't have a budget, right? So if we wanted to implement something that was very powerful, they would have to have subpoena power. It would have to be a very big effort. And I would rather place my energy in trying to figure out how, again, we really allocate resources differently in our community to try to get at meeting people's needs, right? Ensuring, like I said earlier, that mental health aspect, the addiction, homelessness. How do we move people out of distress? To me, that feels like a much better use of my time and energy than frankly there have been very few community review groups that have been successful. And I want to look at the data. I think that that's important. I want to look at best practices. And I actually have been, just one more thought, I've been advocating to bring, I'm very glad we have our auditor. I did a ton of research on them. I think they have a lot of great experts. Often what causes pause for a lot of community is that auditors are often made up of other ex-police officers, ex-law enforcement, which causes some anxiety. I've been advocating to bring also an organization called the Center for Policing Equity. They really do research and data and provide that data-driven sort of solutions. They look at police behaviors. They look at, community complaints, and then are able to provide us with this broad set of policy recommendations. I think that, in addition with the auditor, would be very powerful and insightful.
Thank you very much, Johana. Of course, some would say that this does put a lot more pressure on the City Council, which would be reviewing the work of the auditor to ensure that matters are actually dealt with. Bobbie, you have our final question. We just have a minute answer from each of our guests.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to go to you. Las Cruces is a diverse community. We know that. What strategies are in place to ensure that the diversity within our police force is consistent with the demographics of our city?
Well, so what I've done, Bobbie, I'm a mind reader, so I'm ready for this one. So the census shows that Las Cruces, and they count white, including Hispanic and Latino, as 87%. Las Cruces Police Department, 95%. African American, the census says 2.6% Las Cruces, LCPD 2.5%. American Indian, Las Cruces 1.5%, LCPD 0.6%. Census Bureau, 1.7% Asian. LCPD, 1.3% Asian. Census Bureau, 2 or more races, 58.6% Hispanic. LCPD, 60% Hispanic. I don't think we can get much better numbers than that.
We're pretty close then, is what you're saying.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Madam Councilor, what do you think we should do to make sure it stays that way?
Well, the only thing I'll add, I'm really glad the mayor mentioned those numbers. I did not know. That's really impressive and amazing. What I will add, though, that for me, it goes beyond diversity. For me, is about all of us, even including people of color, we have implicit biases that we've been burned in our brain over years and years. And so for me, it's about serious implicit bias conversations, training, and addressing how that shows up in our everyday lives. To me, that is what matters even more than just the diversity being reflected in our police department.
Excellent conversation. We will hope to do it again, maybe with the first report that comes in from the new police auditor to review the work that they've done, to see not only what the two of you think about this, Mayor and Councilor Bencomo, but also what the community thinks about it. Bobbie Green from the NAACP. Bobbie, thank you for this series. The last 4 weeks have been fantastic, and we look forward to more discussions in the future.
I love the dialogue. It's been excellent, and I thank KRWG, and I also thank you, Fred, for the wonderful partnership. And thanks to both of you, Mayor Miyagishima and my new friend, City Councilwoman Johana Bencomo. Thank you both.
Take care, everybody. That is our time for now. Join us this week on KRWG Radio every weekday. It's Morning Edition from 5 to 9, Fresh Air at 11, followed by Here and Now, noon to 2, and All Things Considered, 4 to 7. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org, and we would love to hear from you. Email us with your story ideas and video submissions. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. For all of us at KRWG News, I'm Fred Martino. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.